The white rose was gone by morning. Lysander searched his room twice, even looked under the window ledge where it had rested. But there was nothing, only a faint mark on the stone where the petals had lain. It was as if the flower had never existed. He told himself it was a dream, a trick of exhaustion. Yet the unease remained, coiling quietly in the back of his mind. Outside, the kingdom of Vareth stirred beneath a sky that never changed. Silver clouds hanging motionless, the horizon forever gray. The people were used to it, but Lysander couldn't stop wondering what real dawn might look like. That afternoon, a messenger arrived from the royal court. The queen requested his presence in her private garden. The queen's garden was nothing like the rest of the palace. While the courtyards were filled with banners and fountains, her garden was wild, old trees twisted together like fingers, flowers that shimmered faintly under the twilight, vines creeping along ancient statues. It smelled of rain and something older, like forgotten memories. 2 guards bowed and opened the wrought iron gate. Lysander stepped inside. At the center of the garden stood Queen Aveline, wearing a simple gown of gray silk. Without her crown, she looked almost mortal, fragile, though her eyes still carried that strange, quiet power. "You came," she said softly. "I was summoned," he replied, unsure how to greet her outside the throne room. She smiled faintly. "So dutiful. You have not changed." Lysander frowned slightly. "I don't remember ever being different." Her gaze grew distant, as if she saw something far beyond him. "No," she murmured. "Perhaps you don't." She turned and began walking among the roses. Their petals glowed faintly with silver light, each one cool to the touch. Lysander followed, careful not to step on the vines. "Do you know why these flowers bloom only in my garden?" she asked. He shook his head. "They are nourished by moonlight, not soil," she said quietly. "When I was young, before the twilight came, I made a vow to the Moon Queen. I asked her to protect this land, to keep it safe from time, from war, from death. She granted my wish, but she took something in return." Lysander listened in silence, his heart steady, but his mind uneasy. "What did she take?" "My reflection," Aveline answered. "Every century when I gaze into a mirror, I see less of myself. I am not aging, Lysander. I am fading." Her words sent a chill through him. "That's not possible." She looked at him then, her eyes filled with a sorrow too deep to name. "Everything is possible when you ask a goddess to change your fate." They stood in silence for a long time. Wind brushed the roses, making them hum softly like distant music. Then Aveline turned to him again, her tone lighter. "Tell me, do you still dream?" He hesitated. "Sometimes." "And what do you see?" He considered lying, but something in her expression stopped him. "You," he said quietly. "I saw you walking under a silver moon. You asked me if I remembered you." The queen's face went still. Her hands tightened around a rose stem until the thorns pricked her skin, drawing a drop of bright silver blood. She didn't seem to notice. "Then the dreams have started again," she whispered. "The bond isn't broken after all." "What bond?" Lysander asked, stepping closer. Aveline looked up, her voice trembling like wind on glass. "Long ago, before this kingdom, before the curse, there was a knight who swore to protect me. When I fell, he offered his soul to the Moon Queen to save mine. The goddess bound our fates together. But in every life she ensures we are born apart so that the curse never ends." Her eyes met his. "You are that knight, Lysander." The world seemed to sway. Lysander stared at her, unable to speak. "That's impossible," he said at last. "I'm just a soldier." "Perhaps," she whispered. "But the Moon Queen does not forget promises or debts." That night Lysander could not sleep. Her words echoed in his mind like a distant bell. You are that night, bound by a curse. It sounded like madness, and yet when he closed his eyes, he saw her again, not as a queen, but as the woman from his dreams, the one with sorrowful eyes and a voice like falling rain. He sat up, restless, and found himself walking through the palace halls, guided by instinct more than thought. The corridors were silent. Guards stood like statues, their armor glinting faintly. He ended up before the door to the Queen's Hall, of mirrors, a chamber no one entered except Aveline herself. The great doors were carved with moons and roses, and a strange chill crept through the cracks. Something called to him. Against reason, he pushed the doors open. Inside, hundreds of mirrors lined the walls, tall, narrow, some cracked, some clear as water. Each one reflected him in a slightly different way. In one, his eyes were silver. In another, his face was older. In one, he wasn't there at all. And in the center of the hall stood a single great mirror framed in silver vines. Its surface shimmered like still water. When Lysander stepped closer, the reflection changed. It wasn't him staring back. It was Aveline, but younger, dressed in white, chains of light around her wrists. She spoke, her voice echoing from beyond the glass. "Free me!" He stumbled back. "Who are you?" "You know me," she said sadly. "You always do." Her hand pressed against the glass. Light flared, and he felt a pull deep in his chest, like a thread tightening between them. "Free me, or she will fade," the reflection whispered. "The curse feeds on her soul. When the century ends, the goddess will claim her heart, and all that she loves will turn to stone." Before he could answer, the mirror darkened, the image swallowed by shadow. The next morning, the palace was in quiet unrest. Rumors spread that a strange tremor had passed through the queen's quarters during the night. Mirrors had cracked, and the roses in her garden had withered black. Cale found Lysander in the training yard, his face pale from sleeplessness. "Mother's been unwell," the prince said. "She says it's nothing, but the court physician looked frightened. Did you see her last night?" Lysander hesitated. "No," he lied. "I was in my quarters." Cale sighed. "I'm taking a small unit to the Shadow Vale tomorrow. The border scouts reported strange movements there. I could use you at my side again." "The Shadow Vale?" Lysander repeated. The name made him uneasy. "It's only a forest," Cale said, trying to sound casual. "Dark, cursed, and unpleasant, but still a forest." Lysander forced a nod. "I'll be ready." Before dawn, he packed his weapons and prepared his horse. As he tightened the saddle straps, he heard soft footsteps behind him. Aveline stood there, wrapped in a cloak of deep blue. Her face looked pale, and her eyes shimmered faintly under the torchlight. "You're leaving," she said quietly. "Prince's orders," Lysander replied. "He believes something stirs in the Vale." The queen looked away. "The Shadow Vale was once the heart of this kingdom, before it turned to ruin. Be careful there." "The trees remember." He hesitated, then asked, "The reflection I saw, was it real?" Aveline met his gaze for a long moment. "The mirrors show truth that words cannot hold. What you saw was my curse, bound in its purest form. If it called to you, then the Moon Queen has begun her game again." She reached into her cloak and drew out a pendant, a moonstone strung on a silver chain. "Take this," she said, placing it in his hand. "It will protect your heart from breaking." Lysander closed his fingers around it. "Why are you helping me?" Aveline smiled sadly. "Because every time the curse returns, you always try to save me." Before he could speak, she stepped back, her figure melting into the mist. As dawnless light touched the horizon, Lysander rode with Kale's unit toward the Shadow Vale. The world grew darker the closer they came. The trees rose high and ancient, their branches whispering in the wind like voices. By the time night fell, they set up camp beneath the black canopy. The men spoke quietly, unnerved by the strange silence of the woods. Lysander sat apart, fingering the moonstone pendant. It pulsed faintly as if alive. When he finally drifted into uneasy sleep, he dreamed again. He stood before the same chained reflection, her voice soft and pleading. "Free me, before the moon turns red. If she dies, you die too." He woke with a gasp. The moonstone burned cold against his skin, and across the camp the shadows shifted, forming the faint outline of a woman standing just beyond the firelight. Her eyes were silver, and her voice was the queen's. "You saw her, didn't you?" she whispered. The kingdom of Vareth had no sunrise. For as long as anyone could remember, the sky had been painted in shades of twilight, a world caught between day and night. Silver mist hung over its towers, and the air always smelled faintly of rain that never fell. Inside the grand palace, torches burned low, throwing soft golden light across marble floors. It was a night of celebration. The kingdom's young warriors had returned from a long campaign against the shadow tribes beyond the Black Mountains. Music filled the halls and laughter echoed under the domed ceilings. Among the warriors was Lysander, tall, quiet, and known for his calm courage. He was not born of noble blood, but Prince Kale had called him brother since childhood. The two had fought side by side for years. Lysander's blade was sharp, but his heart was gentle, and that gentleness often set him apart from the others. That night, Kale stood beside him on the marble balcony overlooking the feast. "The kingdom will remember this day," the prince said proudly, raising a goblet of dark wine. "We came home as heroes," Lysander smiled faintly. "Heroes covered in mud and scars?" "Scars make the story better," Kale laughed, clapping his shoulder. "Now come. There's someone I want you to meet." They descended the stairs into the great hall, where hundreds of candles flickered against crystal chandeliers. The music softened as they approached the high dais, the seat of the queen. She sat beneath a canopy of silver thread, her gown shimmering like starlight. Her name was Aveline, and though she was old enough to be Kale's mother, her face looked untouched by time. Her eyes were pale and distant, like light seen through water. Kale bowed deeply. "Mother, may I present Lysander of the Silver Guard, the man who saved my life more times than I can count." Lysander knelt politely, but the queen lifted a hand. "No need for such formality," she said in a voice both soft and commanding. "You are a friend of my son. That makes you my guest." When Lysander looked up, her eyes met his, and for a heartbeat the sound of the music faded. Her gaze carried something more than kindness. It was as if she recognized him from a dream she had long forgotten, trying to ease the strange tension. Lysander smiled and said lightly, "Forgive me, Your Majesty, but I must say, your mother's prettier than any girl I've ever dated." The hall went silent. For a moment, Kale blinked, unsure if he had heard correctly. Then the soldiers laughed. The jest spread like fire across the room, but the queen only smiled. It was not a polite smile, nor one of amusement. It was calm, quiet, and knowing. "You speak carelessly," she said, "but with honesty. Few dare to do either." Lysander bowed again, feeling his face grow warm. "My apologies, Your Majesty." "There is nothing to forgive," she replied. "Enjoy the feast, brave one. You have earned it." Her voice lingered in his mind long after he returned to the table. Hours passed. The music grew louder. Wine spilled, laughter rose, and torches burned low. But Lysander felt distant from it all. Every time he looked toward the dais, the queen's eyes seemed to find him again, quiet, watchful, as if measuring something unseen. When the hall finally emptied, Lysander slipped away from the celebration and wandered through the palace gardens. Moonlight rested on the marble fountains. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of roses. He paused by the pond at the center, where silver fish glided under the water's surface. A soft voice spoke behind him. "The noise grows tiring after a while, doesn't it?" He turned. The queen stood among the shadows, her white cloak trailing over the grass. Without her crown, she looked younger, not like a ruler, but like a woman lost in thought. Lysander bowed slightly. "Your Majesty, forgive me." "I didn't mean to," she raised a hand. "You needn't fear me, Lysander. I only wish to breathe the night air. It reminds me of what was once free." Her words confused him. "Free?" She looked up at the still sky. "Once, before this kingdom became eternal twilight, we had mornings. Sunlight touched our towers. But that light came with a price. I made sure it would never fall again." He frowned, unsure how to answer. "You speak as if you caused the twilight." Her smile was faint. "Perhaps I did." For a moment, neither spoke. The silence felt thick, filled with something unspoken. Then the queen turned to leave. "Rest well, Lysander," she said softly. "You will need your strength soon." Before he could ask what she meant, she disappeared into the garden's mist, leaving behind the faint scent of roses. That night, Lysander dreamed. He stood in a field of silver flowers beneath a pale moon. In the distance, a woman walked barefoot through the mist. She wore no crown, only a white gown that shimmered like water. Her hair, long and dark, flowed around her like ink in light. "Who are you?" Lysander called. The woman turned and his breath caught. It was Aveline, but not as he had seen her at the feast. This version of her was younger, her eyes bright and full of sorrow. She raised a trembling hand toward him. "Do you remember me?" she whispered. Before he could speak, a shadow passed over the moon. The air turned cold. A voice deep and echoing filled the sky. "Do not touch what is bound by my curse." The dream shattered like glass. Lysander woke with a start. His heart pounded, and sweat dampened his brow. The moonlight through the window looked strange, sharper, colder. He sat up, trying to shake the dream from his mind. Then he saw it. On the stone ledge by his bed rested a single white rose. Its petals glowed faintly in the moonlight, untouched by shadow. He frowned. The rose could only have come from one place, the queen's private garden, a place no one entered without her invitation. The guards were forbidden to even look toward it. Lysander reached out carefully, touching the soft petals. The flower was real, but cool as ice beneath his fingers. A drop of water fell from it, landing on his palm. And for an instant, he heard her voice again, soft as a sigh. "Do not forget what you saw." The next morning, Cale found him staring at the flower. "What is that?" the prince asked, raising an eyebrow. "I found it here," Lysander replied, hiding the unease in his tone. "A gift, maybe. It looks like one of the queen's roses." Cale laughed. "Then someone has courage. My mother guards that garden more fiercely than the treasury. Perhaps she's finally learning generosity." Lysander tried to laugh too, but the sound felt hollow. Something about the flower made him uneasy, not because it was beautiful, but because it felt alive. Later that day, as the two men trained in the courtyard, Lysander caught sight of the queen watching from the balcony above. When their eyes met, she gave a faint nod, almost unnoticeable but deliberate. He froze for a heartbeat, sword still raised. Then she turned and disappeared behind the curtains. Cale noticed his distraction and smirked. "Don't tell me my mother has you under her spell already." Lysander tried to respond lightly. "She's a remarkable woman." "She's a mystery," Cale said, lowering his sword. "Always has been. People whisper strange things about her, that she hasn't aged in 100 years, that she speaks to the moon itself. But I say they're fools," Lysander hesitated. "And what do you believe?" Cale shrugged. "She's my mother. That's all I need to know." But that night, when Lysander lay awake staring at the ceiling, he couldn't stop thinking about her, the sound of her voice, the look in her eyes, the dream that felt too real. When sleep finally came, it carried whispers with it. Whispers of the queen's name, and a promise that the twilight was not eternal. That something or someone had the power to break it. And in the silent darkness, the white rose on his windowsill began to wither, its petals turning from silver to black.